Imagine being so handsome that every woman politely declines your proposal like you just asked for their tax returns. Now imagine it 12 times in a row. That is Vaedrin's life. That is his entire existence. That is the very definition of emotionally tragic. And yet, somehow, highly entertaining for the court gossip committee. If beauty were a crime, King Vaedrin Corvith would have been executed 12 times already, and the kingdom would have sold tickets. At this exact moment, the most eligible alpha in 3 territories was standing on a gold-inlaid platform, being rejected with the gentle politeness normally reserved for returning slightly expired cheese. Yes. Again. Before we proceed with this historic emotional damage, do yourself a favor and subscribe. Because if you leave me alone with this level of second-hand embarrassment, I will personally inform Queen Mother Velmora that you volunteered to provide her grandchildren. Don't test me. Good. Now where were we? Ah yes, public humiliation. The 12th selection ceremony of King Vaedrin Corvith was going poorly. Again. The grand ballroom glittered with chandeliers, silk, and the faint smell of shattered male confidence. Nobles packed the gallery, leaning forward with the hungry focus of people who had cleared their afternoon specifically for drama. At the center of it all stood Vaedrin, tall, immaculate, annoyingly symmetrical. The man looked like a sculptor had gotten carried away and refused to stop, and directly in front of him, Lady Paracel of Something Important was smiling the careful smile of a woman about to decline a very expensive invitation. She curtsied, delicately, politely, fatally. "Or Your Majesty," she said sweetly, "you are breathtaking." Vaedrin's eye twitched, not visibly. He was still a professional. "But," she continued, hands folding with tragic gentleness, "you also look like a man who would emotionally devastate me and then forget my birthday." A soft murmur rippled through the court. Vaedrin felt his soul gently remove itself from his body and go lie down somewhere quiet. Lady Paracel pressed on, because apparently she believed in finishing the job thoroughly. "I simply value emotional security." And just like that, rejected. Number 12. In the front row, Queen Mother Velmora slowly closed her eyes. Not in grief. No. In the long-suffering exhaustion of a woman who had invested 30 years into a son who apparently weaponized his own face. Her sigh echoed. It had weight. It had history. It had the faint undertone of someone pricing goats online. Across the ballroom, the Whisper Network activated immediately. "They say he's too symmetrical. It's unsettling. Too much jawline. Suspicious. I heard one lady got nervous and joined a monastery." Vaedrin stood perfectly still while his dignity packed a small bag and quietly exited through the side door. To his credit, he did not flinch. To his eternal suffering, he did hear the next whisper. Soft. Deadly. Unnecessary. "He looks too handsome to stay faithful." Vaedrin blinked once, slowly. Internally, he was now lying face down on the floor of his own soul. Near the back of the hall, 3 minor nobles leaned together over a discreet parchment. Coins clinked softly. 10 silver says he never gets picked," one muttered. "Bold," another replied. "I give him 2 more ceremonies before emotional collapse." A third squinted toward the platform. "Is he blinking slower than usual?" This was Vaedrin's villain origin story. Lady Paracel completed her final curtsy and backed away like a woman who had successfully declined a very persistent dessert tray. Silence fell. Heavy, awkward, full of second-hand embarrassment. Vaedrin drew in a slow breath. Another. Straightened. Because if he was going to suffer, he was going to suffer regally. When he spoke, his voice was smooth, composed, only mildly haunted. "Very well." Queen Mother Velmora opened one eye. She knew that tone. The court leaned forward. Vedran lifted his chin with the dramatic restraint of a man one inconvenience away from buying livestock and disappearing into the countryside. After careful consideration, he said, or with the calm dignity of someone absolutely not spiraling, I have reached a conclusion. Mavrin Quill, lounging 3 seats back, quietly perked up. This looked promising. Vedran continued. I am retiring from the selection process. Gasps. Actual gasps. Somewhere in the back, a noble dropped a coin and did not pick it up. Velmora's eyes snapped fully open. Oh, this boy had made a decision. He was about to regret. Deeply. Vedran spread one elegant hand. Calm. Final. Possibly stupid. I shall pursue a quiet, peaceful life, free of romantic evaluation. In his head he added, with goats. The silence in the ballroom thickened into something that could legally be classified as tension. Then, Queen Mother Velmora smiled. Slowly, warmly, terrifyingly. It was the smile of a woman who had already scheduled several things without consulting anyone. Wonderful, she said gently. Vedran felt the first cold prickle of instinctive fear. Velmora rose with regal grace, turned to the nearest attendant, and delivered the sentence that would ruin his mornings forever. Beginning tomorrow, she said pleasantly, wake His Majesty at 6 sharp. Vedran froze. Mother. Velmora's smile widened. We will be holding daily grandchild progress briefings. Somewhere in the court, Mavrin made a choking noise that might have been laughter trying to escape under professional supervision. Vedran stood very still, very dignified, very aware that his peaceful goat-filled retirement had just burst into flames. And for the first time that day, King Vedran Corvith felt the distant, an unmistakable chill of incoming disaster. King Vedran Corvith was having a beautiful dream. In the dream, he was retired, peaceful, unbothered, living in the countryside with 3 emotionally supportive goats who never once questioned his loyalty or bone structure. It was the happiest he had been in 12 years. And then, bang! His bedroom doors flew open with the subtlety of a military invasion. Where are my grandchildren? Vedran came out of sleep like a man personally attacked by destiny. It was still dark. It was too early for emotions. It was exactly 6 a.m. Slowly, slowly. He turned his head toward the doorway. Queen Mother Velmora stood there in full mourning authority, wrapped in silk and maternal disappointment. Her gaze was sharp, focused, dangerously well-rested. Vedran, though hair slightly disheveled but still offensively handsome, blinked once. Mother. Velmora did not blink back. Instead, she advanced into the room with the calm confidence of a woman who had raised a kingdom and was now deeply unimpressed by her son's lack of productivity. I have been patient, she said. Vedran sat up slowly, already tired. He had been awake for 14 seconds. His peace had lasted 11. Velmora clasped her hands, then delivered the line that would echo through history. Even the neighbor's goat has children, Vedran. Silence, heavy, personal. Vedran stared at her. Mother. She was not finished. Oh no, this woman believed in thorough emotional devastation. 3 kids, she continued calmly. Healthy, energetic. One of them already shows leadership potential. Vedran dragged a hand down his face, but somewhere deep in his soul, something fragile snapped. I am being compared, he said slowly, to livestock. Velmora's expression did not change. If the livestock is producing heirs, she said smoothly, then yes. Vedran briefly considered faking his own death. Not dramatically, not emotionally, just quietly. Slip out a window, grow a beard, start over somewhere remote with low expectations and limited maternal oversight. He was still calculating the logistics when a familiar voice floated in from the doorway. Light, pleasant, deeply suspicious. "Well," it said cheerfully, "this looks like a productive morning." Vedran's eyes narrowed. "Oh no. No, not today. Not at 6 in the morning." Mavrin Quill leaned casually against the doorframe, like a man who had never once made a good decision, and was proud of it. His smile was bright, uninterested, dangerously entertained. Velmora glanced at him, then back at her son, clearly deciding that whatever chaos was about to unfold was probably educational. "Fix him," she told Mavrin calmly. And then, like the terrifying professional she was, she turned and swept out of the room, leaving behind the lingering scent of pressure and long-term expectations. The doors closed. Silence returned. Vedran stared straight ahead, very still, very tired. "You heard nothing," he said. Mavrin pushed off the doorframe and strolled in, hands behind his back, eyes already scanning Vedran's face with the focus of a man about to commit creative crimes. "Oh, I heard everything," Mavrin said brightly, "including the part where you're losing to a goat." Vedran turned his head slowly. If looks could kill, what Mavrin would have been a tasteful memorial by now. Mavrin circled the bed once, thoughtful, humming, studying Vedran's face like a scholar confronting a very symmetrical problem. Vedran endured this for approximately 5 seconds. "Mavrin." "Hmm? Why are you looking at me like that?" Mavrin stopped, tilted his head. There was a long pause, the kind of pause that precedes either brilliance or felony. Then Mavrin smiled, slowly, brightly, catastrophically. "We make you ugly." Silence detonated. Vedran blinked, once, twice. His brain refused to process the sentence. "I'm sorry," he said carefully. "What did you just say to me with your mouth?" Mavrin's smile only widened. "We," he repeated patiently, "make you ugly." Vedran stared at him. And then, for 7 full, uninterrupted minutes, King Vedran Corveth was personally offended. Not mildly, not politely. No, this was full royal indignation. He stood, paced, turned, gestured sharply. "I moisturize," he said, scandalized. Mavrin nodded. "I have a skin regimen. Very thorough. My cheekbones have been complimented by foreign dignitaries. Multiple times. I own," Vedran finished with deep personal betrayal, 7 decorative mirrors. Mavrin held up both hands in surrender. "Exactly my point." Vedran stopped pacing. Slowly, dangerously. "Explain." Mavrin's eyes lit up. Ah, there it was. Permission to be irresponsible. He clasped his hands behind his back and began to pace like a man presenting a business proposal that would absolutely end in consequences. "You are too handsome," Mavrin said. Vedran grimaced. "I am aware. It's scaring them." "I beg your pardon." Mavrin turned, utterly serious. "Did women look at you and see emotional risk, high cheekbone instability, and the strong possibility of poetry-related betrayal?" Vedran opened his mouth, closed it, hated, deeply, that this was not entirely inaccurate. Mavrin leaned forward slightly, eyes gleaming. "So," he said softly, "we fix the problem." A beat. Then, with the confidence of a man who should absolutely be supervised, Mavrin reached into his coat and pulled out a roll of parchment. Vedran's stomach dropped, slowly, horribly. "Mavrin," he said carefully. Mavrin unrolled the parchment with a proud flourish. "What is that?" Mavrin beamed. "Concept sketches." Vedran looked down and immediately knew 3 things. First, these were detailed. Second, these were enthusiastic. Third, these were much worse than expected. He stared in silence. Long. Haunted. Why?" Vedran said faintly. "Do I look like I lost a fight with a decorative rake?" Mavrin tapped one of the drawings proudly. "Oh, that's version 3. Version 5 has more emotional trauma." Vedran closed his eyes. Just for a moment. Briefly considering prison, or exile, or simply walking into the sea. when he opened them again, he realized, with slow, dawning horror, Mavrin was completely serious, and somewhere in the very near future, Vedran Korveth was about to make a terrible, terrible decision. There are many moments in a man's life that force him to reevaluate his decisions. This was one of Vedran Korveth's top 3, possibly top 1, possibly engraved permanently on the walls of his regret. He was seated in a high-backed chair in his private chambers, while his best friend prepared to vandalize his face. With enthusiasm. "Hold still," Mavrin Quill said brightly, sleeves already rolled up like a man about to commit artisanal crimes. Vedran did not move, because he had dignity, because he had composure, because if he moved, he might run. "Remind me," Vedran said slowly, "why I agreed to this." Mavrin didn't even look up. "Because you're losing to a goat." Vedran closed his eyes. Briefly. Spiritually. Yes, that would do it. The chamber had been arranged with far too much ceremony for what was, fundamentally, facial sabotage. A table of pigments, fine brushes, several small jars whose contents looked legally questionable. And because the universe enjoyed humiliating Vedran personally, 3 palace servants stood off to the side, pretending very badly not to stare. They were failing. Spectacularly. Vedran opened one eye. "Why are there witnesses?" The servants immediately snapped their gazes toward the ceiling with the synchronized panic of people who enjoyed their employment. Mavrin waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, relax. I needed assistance." One of the servants made a small, choking sound that suggested they had not, in fact, volunteered. Vedran inhaled slowly through his nose. Exhaled. He was a king. He was composed. He was absolutely making a mistake. Mavrin stepped closer, studying Vedran's face with the intense focus of a painter who had just discovered a very expensive canvas. Mavrin murmured. Vedran stiffened. That was not a comforting sound. Mavrin. "Yes? Why did you just at me?" "No reason," Mavrin said cheerfully. "Just deciding where the emotional damage should live." Vedran stared straight ahead. Internally, he was already drafting his will. The first touch of the brush was cool, precise, far too confident. Vedran did not flinch, because he was brave, because he was strong, because there were witnesses and he refused to give Mavrin the satisfaction. A long moment passed. Then another. Mavrin leaned back slightly, squinting. Vedran lasted exactly 4 seconds. "Does it look real?" Mavrin answered instantly. "Oh, absolutely." Behind him, one of the servants made a noise that sounded suspiciously like a swallowed cough. Vedran's eyes narrowed. Slowly. "You hesitated." "I did not. You breathed differently. That was normal breathing." Vedran did not believe him for a single royal second. Brush strokes continued. Dabs, blends, and the occasional deeply concerning, Vedran endured it with the rigid posture of a man trying not to imagine his own reputation collapsing in real time. Another minute passed. Then, "Does it look real?" Mavrin didn't even blink. Terrifyingly. A second servant turned sharply and pretended to adjust absolutely nothing on the wall. Vedran's suspicion grew legs and started pacing. "You're lying." "I would never." "You absolutely would." "Fair." Time passed. Too much time. At one point, Mavrin leaned in very close, tongue slightly out in concentration, and added what he described as depth. Vedran immediately regretted allowing artistic freedom. "Mavrin," he said carefully. "Yes, your increasingly concerning majesty. Why does it feel like you just added enthusiasm?" "Because I did." Vedran's soul attempted to exit his body again. Finally. Mavrin stepped back, head tilted, eyes narrowed critically. The room went very, very quiet. Vedran swallowed once. "Does it look real?" This time, there was a pause. Tiny, suspicious, illegal. All three servants froze like decorative statues with employment anxiety. Mavrin's smile returned, bright, confident, wildly untrustworthy. "Oh," he said. "Oh, it definitely looks... something." Vedran's stomach dropped. "Something is not the word I want, Mavrin." Mavrin ignored him completely. Instead, he reached forward and turned Vedran's chair toward the standing mirror. Slowly, dramatically, with the flourish of a man unveiling either genius or felony. Vedran looked, and went very, very still. The scar was dramatic, aggressive, emotionally loud. It cut across his face with the bold confidence of something that had never once heard the word subtle. It looked like he had fought a demon, lost halfway, then stopped for dramatic lighting. Silence filled the chamber. One of the servants quietly mouthed a prayer. Mavrin clasped his hands behind his back and rocked once on his heels, deeply pleased with himself. "Well?" he asked. Vedran stared at his reflection, long, haunted, profoundly aware that his life had just taken a sharp and unnecessary turn. "Mavrin?" "Yes?" "I look like I lost a duel with landscaping equipment." Mavrin beamed. "Exactly the vibe we were going for." Vedran closed his eyes, took a long, slow breath, and felt, deep in his very well-moisturized bones, that this was going to end badly. Very badly. Mavrin stepped back one final time, admiring his work like a proud and deeply questionable artist. It looked dramatic, possibly criminal, definitely irreversible in spirit. And somewhere in the near future, King Vedran Corveth was about to terrify an entire ballroom. There are moments in history when a man should listen to his instincts. King Vedran Corveth would like it formally recorded that this was not one of those moments. Because at precisely mid-afternoon, dressed in full royal black and walking with the doomed confidence of someone who had trusted Mavrin Quill unsupervised, Vedran approached the grand ballroom doors. Behind him, Mavrin was already vibrating. Not with nerves. Oh no. With anticipation. "Fon, you look fantastic," Mavrin whispered. Vedran did not turn around. "If you laugh," he said calmly, "I will reassign you to goat management." Mavrin made a deeply emotional noise that suggested he was fighting for his life. The herald struck the floor with his staff. "His Majesty." The doors swung open. Vedran stepped inside, and the room went silent. Not polite silence, not respectful silence. No. This was the thick, suffocating quiet of a room collectively realizing it had made a terrible mistake showing up today. Vedran walked forward. 1 step. 2. 3. And then, Lady Number 1 fainted. Not gradually, not delicately. She just left consciousness immediately. Down she went like an overachiever with a schedule. Gasps erupted. Vedran froze mid-step. Oh no. Lady Number 2 locked eyes with him. Her pupils dilated. Her fan trembled. And then... She screamed. Not a polite scream, not a courtly gasp. No. This woman screamed like she had just seen her tax records come alive and start walking. "Munst!" In a stunning escalation of poor decisions, she threw her fan. At the king, it sailed through the air with surprising commitment. Vedran reflexively caught it, because apparently today was just a festival of indignity. Behind him, Mavrin made a sound. It started as a wheeze, then a choke, then a full-body silent shaking that suggested his soul had achieved enlightenment. Vedran did not turn around. He refused to give the man oxygen. Unfortunately, the room was only getting started. A baron in the second row made direct eye contact with the scar. His face went pale, then paler, then spiritually absent. Without warning, the man abandoned all noble dignity and dived behind a decorative chaise. Just gone. Vanished. A grown aristocrat, hiding behind furniture. Vedran's eye twitched. This was deteriorating rapidly. And then, from somewhere in the back, a voice screamed the 3 words that would destroy everything. "Ancient demonic beast!" Silence. 1 beat, 2 beats, and then panic spread through the ballroom like extremely enthusiastic bad gossip. Ladies shrieked, chairs scraped, someone knocked over a refreshment table and did not apologize. 2 royal guards rushed forward heroically and ran directly into each other. Helmets clanged. One spun. The other sat down abruptly and reconsidered his career choices. Vedran stood in the center of it all, motionless, dignified, internally screaming into the void. Across the ballroom, or the royal cat, normally a creature of refined judgment and mild contempt, took one long look at the king and immediately began climbing the chandelier. Not quickly, not chaotically. No. With the calm, determined energy of someone permanently removing themselves from society. Higher, 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 until it reached the top and settled there like a furry symbol of disapproval. Vedran closed his eyes briefly. Just for a moment. Because this was not the controlled reaction he had been promised. Behind him, Mavren was no longer pretending. The man had one hand braced against a pillar, shoulders shaking violently, tears visibly streaming down his face. He was crying. Crying. From laughter. "Breathe," Mavren wheezed to himself. "Just breathe." Vedran turned his head slowly. Very slowly. Mavren. Mavren lost the battle completely. What the laugh that escaped him was loud. Unholy. Spiritually committed. Vedran faced forward again. Because violence in public was apparently frowned upon. The ballroom was still in active disarray. One noble was fanning Lady Number 1, who remained enthusiastically unconscious. Lady Number 2 was being gently restrained from throwing additional objects. The Baron was still behind the chaise. Vedran inhaled, exhaled, and finally, for the first time since this entire catastrophic plan began, King Vedran Corvith accepted a terrible, undeniable truth. He had made a mistake, a large one, possibly historic, and judging by the continued screaming in the West Wing, the worst was very much still ahead. The screaming eventually stopped, which, frankly, felt suspicious. The ballroom looked like dignity had come here to die. Chairs overturned. The fans abandoned like fallen soldiers. One decorative centerpiece lay on its side, quietly reconsidering its life choices. King Vedran Corvith stood in the middle of the wreckage, still upright. Barely. Servants hovered at the edges, whispering with the subtlety of people who absolutely would be discussing this for the next 40 years. Mavren Quill had finally achieved breathing again, though he was still glowing with the smug spiritual fulfillment of a man whose terrible idea had exceeded expectations. Vedran was preparing to issue several career-ending threats when footsteps, calm, unhurried, completely disrespectful of the emotional devastation in the room. Every head turned. She was still here. Lysara Ven. While the rest of the nobility had evacuated like a building was on fire, she strolled forward as if she were 10 minutes early for a mildly boring appointment. No panic, no dramatics, just curiosity. Vedran straightened automatically, because something about her posture suggested survival instincts were advisable. She stopped 3 feet away, looked at him, really looked. Then, she squinted, not fearfully, critically, like a tailor inspecting uneven stitching. Vedran felt, for the first time in his adult life, vaguely judged. Lysara took one slow step to the left, then another. She began circling him. Slowly, hands clasped behind her back, head tilted, studying the scar like it personally owed her money. Vedran's jaw tightened. "Is there," he said carefully, "a reason you are orbiting me like a suspicious moon?" She didn't answer immediately, which was already disrespectful. Instead, she leaned in slightly, squinted harder, and then delivered the line that would echo through Vedran's nightmares for the foreseeable future. "It looks like a jam toddler attacked your face and then gave up halfway through." Silence. Not normal silence. Catastrophic silence. Somewhere behind Vedran, Mavrin made a choking noise that sounded medically concerning. Vedran did not move, because his brain had just briefly left the building. Lysara straightened, unimpressed. She tapped her chin thoughtfully. "Whoever did this to you," she continued conversationally, "I assume they are either deeply untrained or actively hostile toward your future." Mavrin audibly inhaled his own soul. Vedran's eye twitched. "Be careful," he said, voice dangerously calm. "Oh, I am," Lysara said brightly. Then she leaned in again. Closer this time, but close enough that Vedran could see the sharp intelligence in her eyes, the kind that made bad decisions feel personally targeted. She pointed at the scar. "This line here?" she said. Pause, head tilt. "Embarrassing." Vedran stopped responding. Fully, completely, spiritually. If one listened carefully, one could almost hear the internal systems failure. Behind him, Mavrin had gone very, very quiet, the silence of a man realizing he might soon be unemployed by force. Lysara, meanwhile, stepped back with the satisfied air of someone who had just finished a light spring cleaning of another person's ego. "Well," she said briskly, dusting imaginary lint from her sleeve, "this has been educational." She turned, started walking away. Vedran's survival instincts finally rebooted. "Wait." She paused, half-turned. One eyebrow lifted with surgical precision. Vedran opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, because somehow, against all logic, all dignity, and several strongly worded internal objections, he needed her to keep talking. Lysara's lips curved just slightly, like she knew, like she absolutely knew. Then came the final blow. Calm, casual, lethal. "Come find me," she said. "I fix mistakes for a living." And with that, she walked out of the ruined ballroom like she had not just personally ended a monarch's emotional stability. The doors closed behind her. Silence settled again. Heavy. Final. Vedran stood very still, very quiet, very aware that his life had just taken a sharp and deeply inconvenient turn. Behind him, Mavrin whispered, awestruck, "Your Majesty." Long pause. Longer pause. Vedran spoke without turning. "Mavrin." "Yes, I'm sire?" "If you say one word," Vedran said softly, "I will personally introduce you to the neighbor's goat." Mavrin shut his mouth with the speed of a man who valued continued existence. Vedran stared at the closed doors, at the space where Lysara Ven had just casually detonated his dignity, and for the first time in years, the king of the realm was finished. Completely, irrecoverably, finished. 3 days after the demon selection disaster, because that is what the kingdom named it, the kingdom of Arketh was thriving. The treasury was stable. The borders were quiet. The crops were doing something optimistic and aggressively agricultural. The king, however, was buffering. It began during the morning war council. Vedran sat at the head of the long obsidian table, posture perfect, expression regal, but crown angled with weaponized dignity. Historians would later describe his expression as deeply concerning silence. A general was speaking. "And if we reinforce the eastern," Vedran, very softly, to absolutely no one. "Jam application quality." Silence detonated across the table. The general blinked. Once. Twice. "Your Majesty?" Vedran straightened like a man who had absolutely not just embarrassed himself in front of his entire military command. "Yes. Excellent. Proceed. Reinforce the—" Long pause. Very long pause. "Jam." 3 chairs down, Mavrin Quill slowly lowered his face into his hands and began reconsidering every life choice that had led him here. By midday, the symptoms had escalated. Symptom number 1. Unprovoked staring. Vaedren stood in the palace corridor, not moving, not blinking, just existing ominously. A servant walked past, then another. Then the royal gardener wheeled an entire decorative shrub past him, like this was a completely normal day in the monarchy. Vaedren did not react, because inside his head, Lysara Ven was circling him again. That slow, merciless walk. That squint that should honestly require a license. That voice, calm, precise, devastating. Your scar looks like it was applied by a toddler with jam and confidence. Vaedren's eye twitched. Symptom number 2. Betrayal by facial prosthetics. In his private chambers, Vaedren stood before the mirror like a man confronting his worst enemy. Slowly, he touched the fake scar. Accusingly. "You," he whispered. The scar, being painted, remained emotionally unavailable. "I trusted you." From behind him came the long, exhausted sigh of a man watching his own bad ideas reach full maturity. As Mavrin Quill, regretting everything. "Your Majesty," Mavrin said carefully, "it is pigment." Vaedren turned with the slow, haunted dignity of a man personally victimized by arts and crafts. She called it embarrassing. Mavrin physically flinched. To be fair, Vaedren pointed at him with the quiet menace of a king who absolutely could order a beheading before lunch. "Choose your next words like your life has meaning." Mavrin pivoted so fast he nearly got whiplash. To be fair, she was unusually perceptive. Vaedren stared into the middle distance again, voice soft, haunted. Jam application quality. Mavrin closed his eyes. Spiritually, he began drafting his will. Symptom number 3, academic obsession with insults. By late afternoon, Vaedren had summoned Mavrin for what was officially labeled urgent strategic consultation. It was not, but Vaedren paced the length of his study like a man being slowly hunted by his own thoughts. "What," he demanded, "does jam application quality mean?" Mavrin rubbed his temples like they personally owed him compensation. "Your Majesty, is it a technique?" "It is an insult." Vaedren stopped pacing. "A metaphorical one?" "Yes." Vaedren resumed pacing, faster, more distressed. "So she was not commenting on preserves?" Mavrin aged 10 years in real time. "No, Vaedren. She was not reviewing your breakfast." Vaedren stopped again. Very still. Dangerously still. "She circled me." "Yes." "She squinted." "Yes." "She diagnosed me." "Yes." Vaedren turned slowly, eyes bright with the dawning horror of a man connecting emotional dots he does not like. "Mavrin?" Mavrin already looked tired. "I do not like where this is going." Vaedren inhaled deeply, like a man about to confess to crimes of the heart. "I think—" Long pause. Very dangerous pause. I respected it. Mavrin slid down in his chair like gravity itself had personally betrayed him. "Of course you did." Meanwhile, across the palace, Queen Mother Velmora was not a foolish woman. She was many things: elegant, terrifying, aggressively invested in grandchildren production, and professionally suspicious. And for 3 consecutive days, her son had been behaving like a man who had recently been emotionally drop-kicked down a staircase. She reviewed the reports. War Council, distracted. Trade meeting, whispered about jam. Public appearance, stared at a fountain for 7 uninterrupted minutes. Velmora slowly set the parchment down. Very slowly. But her eyes narrowed with the precision of a hunting falcon who had just smelled plot. "Oh," she said softly. "Oh no." Across the palace, Vaedren was still pacing, still spiraling, still occasionally touching the fake scar like it had personally betrayed his entire bloodline. and in the back of his very doomed, very royal mind, one thought kept replaying, over, and over, and over. Come find me. I fix mistakes for a living. Vedran stopped pacing. Very slowly, he smiled. From the corner of the room, Mavrin felt the exact moment peace left his body, because that was the smile of a man about to make another terrible decision. If you have ever trusted your most chaotic friend with a subtle task, you already know how this ends. Poorly, with witnesses, and at least one hat that should never have existed. But Vedran delivered the order with maximum kingly composure. I require, he said smoothly, a discreet investigation into Lysera Ven. Across the desk, Mavrin Quill nodded with the confidence of a man who absolutely should not have been trusted with the word discreet. Of course, Your Majesty. Pause. A dangerous pause. I will be invisible. Vedran narrowed his eyes. He should have known. He did know. And yet, like the emotionally compromised disaster he had recently become, he allowed it. History would mark this as mistake number 47. 2 hours later, Vedran stood in the marketplace, in disguise, and by disguise we mean, sir, he was wearing a suspiciously large cloak, a hat with emotional baggage and spectacles with completely plain glass. But he looked less like a common citizen and more like a nobleman who had been robbed by a theatrical curtain. Beside him, Mavrin beamed proudly in what can only be described as aggressive incompetence. Blend in, Mavrin whispered. Vedran stared at him. Mavrin. Yes? You are wearing perfume. Mavrin looked down, looked back up. It is subtle. It was not subtle. It announced his presence 3 business days in advance. Across the busy street, Lysera Ven emerged from a narrow workshop doorway. Calm, composed, carrying a small leather case like a woman who definitely knew where all the bodies were buried and had receipts. Vedran's spine snapped straight. That's her, he breathed. Mavrin leaned forward. Too far forward. Suspiciously far forward. Like a man attempting to inspect wildlife with his whole torso. Yes, Mavrin whispered. To very stealth. Lysera paused mid-step. Slowly, she turned her head, directly toward them. Vedran's soul left his body. Do not panic, Mavrin murmured. Vedran was already panicking internally with royal intensity. Lysera's eyes narrowed. She adjusted her grip on the case. Then, she kept walking. Vedran exhaled slowly. Relief began to bloom. Maybe they were safe. Mavrin immediately leaned out from behind a fruit cart and waved. Good afternoon, totally normal citizen, he stage whispered. Vedran nearly passed away on the spot. Lysera did not react immediately, which was worse, much worse. She simply turned a corner. Mavrin perked up. Oh, she's moving quickly. She suspects nothing. Vedran grabbed his sleeve. She absolutely suspects everything. They followed. Poorly. Very poorly. At one point, Vedran walked directly into a hanging rack of scarves. Mavrin knocked over a basket of turnips and tried to kick them back into formation. A small child pointed at them and loudly announced, Mama, those men are bad at hiding. The mother agreed. Out loud. They turned another corner. Empty alley. Quiet. Too quiet. Mavrin squinted. I feel judged. Vedran opened his mouth and immediately stepped on something. Snap. Both men froze. Slowly. Vedran looked down. A chalk line. Attached to... He looked up just in time. A suspended laundry basket dropped from above and dumped an entire avalanche of freshly washed linens directly onto both of them. Silence. From somewhere nearby, very nearby, came Lysera's calm voice. Mavrin, buried under a pillowcase, whispered, We've been made. They untangled themselves with what little grace remained in their souls. Vedran emerged first, hair compromised, hat emotionally defeated, royal pride hanging by a thread. And there, leaning casually against the alley wall, was Lysara Ven, watching them like a woman witnessing live entertainment she did not pay for but was thoroughly enjoying. She looked Vedran up and down, slowly, painfully. Then her gaze shifted to Mavrin. Long pause. Interesting strategy. Mavrin straightened like a man who had just been complimented by fate itself. Thank you. It was sarcasm. He deflated immediately. Lysara pushed off the wall and stepped closer. Unhurried, unimpressed, dangerous. Vedran's brain officially stopped cooperating with management. She circled him once. He stopped breathing. Then she spoke. Calm, precise, lethal. If you're going to spy on me, she said, at least commit properly. Vedran.exe crashed completely. Mavrin made a small, choking sound. Lysara's gaze flicked to the fake scar. Her mouth twitched. Oh no, oh no. Also, she added mildly, your scar is peeling. Vedran felt his ancestors leave his body in shame. He reached up. Horror, betrayal, moisture. The edge of the scar was, in fact, lifting. Mavrin whispered, devastated. Not the jam quality. Lysara stepped back, already bored again, already done with them. Next time, Your Majesty, she said smoothly, try professionals. She turned, walked away, unbothered, unhunted, unimpressed. Vedran stood frozen in the alley like a man who had just been personally defeated by a woman with excellent observational skills. Mavrin slowly turned toward him. You are in danger. Vedran didn't even deny it, because deep in his chest, right where his dignity used to live, something terrible had already taken root, and it was smiling. Lysara Ven's workshop sat on a quiet street, modest and unbothered, the architectural equivalent of someone who absolutely knows your secrets and is waiting patiently. Vedran stood outside the door, regal, composed, internally screaming. Behind him, Mavrin leaned against the opposite wall, eating roasted nuts like this was premium theater. You look nervous, Mavrin said cheerfully. Vedran did not turn. I am not nervous. You have adjusted your cloak 11 times. I am maintaining presentation. You tried to intimidate a doorknob 30 seconds ago. Vedran went very still. It started it. Mavrin bit into another nut and prepared to witness history. But the bell above the door chimed. Lysara did not look up immediately. Red flag, yellow flag, possibly a decorative warning banner. She simply finished writing whatever she was writing, set the pen down with surgical calm, and then looked up. Her eyes landed on Vedran, paused, flicked to the scar, paused longer. Oh, she said mildly. Sir. That O had layers. Vedran drew himself to full alpha height, shoulders back, jaw sharp, voice smooth. I require your professional services. Lysara leaned back in her chair like a woman watching a very confident man walk directly into a glass door. Do you? Not a question. A diagnosis. Vedran's confidence flickered, just briefly, like a candle in emotional wind. Yes, he said, doubling down with the courage of a man who clearly had not learned from recent events. I was told you, fix mistakes. Her gaze dropped to his face again, slow, unhurried, personally violent. She hummed. I try. Mavrin outside the window pressed his face against the glass like a raccoon with ambition. Sit, Lysara said. Vedran sat, immediately, like his body had betrayed him. She stood and approached, calm, focused, carrying the small leather case of doom. Vedran's heartbeat did something deeply unprofessional. She leaned in, close enough to inspect, close enough to absolutely destroy his peace. Her fingers hovered near the scar, paused. Then, she sighed, deeply, disappointedly. Your Majesty, she said gently, it has gotten worse. Mavrin outside made a small, choking noise of delight. Vedran blinked. Worse? Lysara nodded like a woman delivering tragic news about a very ugly painting. "And the left edge is lifting." She tilted her head. "The blending is still ambitious." Another pause, then the killing blow. "And there is," she squinted closer, "what appears to be glitter." Silence. Vedran went rigid. Very slowly, he turned his head. "Mavrin." Outside the window, Mavrin froze mid-note-taking. "Yes?" "You said the finishing powder was matte." Mavrin swallowed. "It was festive matte." Vedran closed his eyes and briefly considered exile. Lysara stepped back, arms folding. "All business, all danger." "I can fix it," she said. Vedran straightened immediately. Too fast. Suspiciously fast. "How much?" She paused, brows lifting slightly. There it was. The moment she noticed. Danger level rising. Slowly, slowly. She smiled. Not kindly. "Oh," she said softly. "You didn't even negotiate." Mavrin outside scribbled aggressively. "Oh, he's gone," he wrote. Vedran attempted recovery. He failed. Gracefully. "I am efficient." Lysara's smile widened just enough to be legally concerning. "Is that what we're calling it?" She stepped closer again, studying him like a puzzle she very much intended to solve. "You want me to maintain the illusion?" she said. Not a question. A trap. "Yes." "You want it believable?" "Yes." "You want the court fooled?" "Yes." She leaned in just slightly, voice soft, sharp. "And you want to stop being publicly humiliated?" Vedran's soul briefly left the chat. Ideally. From outside, Mavrin was now fully crouched under the window, taking blackmail notes with both hands. Lysara stepped back and closed her case with a neat click. "I'll do it," she said. Vedran relaxed too fast. Again. Suspicious behavior. And for a price. He didn't even blink. Done. Silence. Lysara's eyes narrowed. Oh, she noticed that one. Danger level, climbing. Slowly, carefully, like a woman who had just discovered a very interesting problem, she said, "Your Majesty." Vedran realized, too late, that he had stepped directly into emotional quicksand. "Yes?" Her gaze held his. Sharp. Knowing. Deeply unimpressed. "You agreed before I named the price." From outside the window came the quiet, reverent whisper of Mavrin Quill, witnessing premium chaos. "Oh, this man is finished." Lysara tilted her head. Studying him now. Really studying him. Like she had just discovered the kingdom's most expensive bad decision. "Interesting," she murmured. Vedran, powerful Alpha King of Arketh, felt the exact moment the situation stopped being professionally recoverable, and for reasons that should concern everyone involved. He did not retreat. Not even a little. If you have ever told yourself, "I can behave professionally around this person," and then immediately behaved like a malfunctioning houseplant, you and Vedran have something in common. Unfortunately for him, the kingdom was watching. The official story was simple. Lysara Ven had been contracted as a specialized cosmetic consultant to maintain the king's very dramatic, very questionable facial injury. The unofficial story? Vedran had voluntarily signed up to be psychologically rearranged twice a week. Mavrin was having the time of his life. Vedran sat in a private antechamber, posture stiff, expression carefully neutral. Across from him, Lysara opened her leather case with the calm focus of a woman about to commit precision violence. "Or hold still," she said. Vedran held still like his life depended on it. It emotionally did. She leaned in. Close, very close, the kind of close that makes your ancestors start whispering advice. Her fingers brushed his cheek as she began repairing the scar. Vedran's brain. System error. Out loud because he had lost all self-preservation. "Your technique is very efficient." Lysara did not look impressed. "That's because I know what I'm doing." From the corner of the room, Mavrin coughed suspiciously into his fist. Translation: he was absolutely taking mental notes for future emotional blackmail. Unfortunately for Vaedren's remaining dignity, the illusion had to be tested in public. Which is how he found himself walking through the royal gardens with Lysera at his side, like this was a completely normal professional arrangement. It was not normal. Courtiers watched, whispered, pretended not to stare while staring extremely hard. One noblewoman fanned herself aggressively. Another whispered, "Is that the jam man?" Vaedren's eye twitched. Lysera, traitor that she was, almost smiled. Almost. Halfway through the walk, disaster struck. Specifically, a young servant tripped on the garden steps, dropping an entire stack of ceremonial scrolls directly into a decorative fountain. Gasps erupted. The servant looked seconds away from evaporating from shame. Before Lysera could even process it, Vaedren moved. Quick, efficient. He hauled the scrolls out, shook the water free with careful precision, and handed them back gently. "No harm done," he said quietly. The servant stared like she had just witnessed a historical event. "Thank you, or Your Majesty." Vaedren nodded once and stepped back, like helping people was not about to emotionally compromise his reputation. Lysera watched him. Longer than before. Her internal opinion meter ticked upward a microscopic amount. Plus 3% respect, pending review. She frowned slightly. Suspicious development. Across the courtyard, Queen Mother Velmora stood very still, very elegant, very dangerous. Her sharp eyes tracked her son, then shifted to Lysera, then back again. Slowly. Velmora smiled the smile of a woman who smelled plot from 3 kingdoms away. "Oh," she murmured, "this is interesting." Somewhere in the distance, Mavrin felt a chill crawl down his spine. That evening brought the worst possible development, a formal court reception, which meant crowds, lights, and Vaedren forced to stand next to Lysera for extended periods of time without visibly malfunctioning. He was not thriving. At one point he leaned slightly toward her and muttered, "Is the scar holding?" Lysera didn't even look at him. "It's the only thing about you currently behaving." Vaedren took that personally, and also not entirely negatively. This was concerning. From across the room, Mavrin watched like a man witnessing premium theater. He sidled up beside Velmora, a choice that will later be reviewed by historians as reckless. "Lovely evening," he said lightly. Velmora did not look at him. "Beta Quill." Mavrin immediately stood straighter. "Your Majesty's mother." Her gaze remained locked on Vaedren and Lysera. They are standing very close. Mavrin, because survival instincts occasionally visit him, I said, purely professional proximity. Velmora hummed. The hum of doom. Late evening. Balcony. Cool night air. Vaedren and Lysera stood alone for the first time all day. Quiet settled between them. Dangerous quiet. Vaedren cleared his throat. "For the record," he said carefully, "your work today was exceptional." Lysera glanced at him. Suspicion still present, but softer now, by approximately 3 emotionally significant %. "You didn't panic when the fountain incident happened," she said. Vaedren blinked. "Was I supposed to?" A pause. Then, very faintly, Lysera's mouth twitched. "Sir." That was not a full smile, but it was legally classified as progress, Vaedren noticed. Oh, he noticed. Hope, foolish, reckless hope, began to rise. He leaned slightly closer, and at that exact moment, the balcony doors burst open. "For there you are." Queen Mother Velmora. Full dramatic entrance, maximum maternal suspicion. Vaedren jerked back like he had been personally electrocuted. Lysera stepped away smoothly, already composed. Mavrin, somewhere behind Velmora, slowly covered his face. Because peace had officially left the kingdom, and the royal shark had entered hunting mode. Vedran began the day optimistic. This was his first mistake. The scar had held for weeks. Weeks. Do you know how arrogant a man becomes after 2 consecutive weeks of not being publicly humiliated? Very. Extremely. Dangerously. He adjusted his cuffs, glanced once in the mirror, and nodded with the confidence of a man about to be personally betrayed by cosmetics. Behind him, Mavrin lounged in a chair eating grapes like an unhelpful Roman ghost. "You look stable," Mavrin said, and Vedran narrowed his eyes. "Why did you say it like that?" "No reason." There was absolutely a reason. The royal court was packed. Nobles, advisors, one extremely sweaty baron who was working too hard emotionally. Vedran stood at the center of it all, delivering a perfectly respectable address about grain tariffs and border security. Professional, composed, majestic. And then, it happened. A single bead of sweat slid slowly down his temple. Time slowed. Vedran felt it. Oh, he felt it. That tiny, traitorous droplet gliding toward the edge of the scar like it had a personal vendetta. Internally. Oh no. Externally. And therefore the northern trade. Mavrin, from across the chamber, sat up straighter. He had seen the droplet. He knew that droplet. He feared that droplet. Unfortunately, the court contained enemies. But specifically, Lord Halvarin, professional skeptic, part-time menace, full-time nosy man with too much free time. His eyes narrowed. He leaned forward, slowly, suspiciously. "Your Majesty," Halvarin said smoothly, "you appear warm." Vedran's smile did not crack, not even slightly. "I am a passionate ruler." Mavrin choked on a grape. Back in the shadows of Vedran's peripheral vision, the edge of the scar did something deeply disrespectful. It lifted, just slightly, but enough. Enough to threaten his entire bloodline. Vedran's soul left his body and filed a formal complaint. Minutes later, Vedran was speed-walking through a private corridor with the controlled urgency of a man trying not to scream in multiple languages. Mavrin trotted beside him. "You're sweating through the illusion," Mavrin whispered. "I am aware. It's migrating. I am aware." They burst into the consultation chamber where Lysara was calmly organizing tools, like a woman moments away from witnessing nonsense. She looked up, paused, then slowly set her tools down. "What did you do?" Vedran felt judged in 12 different dimensions. "I perspired." Lysara stared at him. Long, flat, unblinking. "Bold of you." "Sit," she ordered. He sat immediately, again, like a man whose survival instincts had unionized against him. Lysara stepped closer, already inspecting the damage. Her fingers brushed his temple. Vedran stopped breathing. Again. This was becoming medically concerning. "You're running warmer than usual," she muttered. Vedran, traitor to himself, said, "Am I?" Mavrin made a violent choking sound in the background. "Because peace is illegal in this kingdom." The doors swung open, hard. Queen Mother Velmora entered like a beautifully dressed natural disaster. "I was told," she said smoothly, "that my son required urgent cosmetic intervention." Silence detonated. Vedran froze. Mavrin froze. Even the furniture emotionally froze. Lysara, however, only glanced over her shoulder. Calm. Too calm. "Oh," she said. "Good afternoon." Velmora's eyes sharpened. The shark had arrived. Because he fears nothing, including survival, Mavrin smiled weakly and said, "Routine maintenance." Vedran turned slowly. "Mavrin?" "Yes?" "Stop helping." Velmora's gaze moved to the scar, then to Lysara, then back again, slowly, dangerously. Meanwhile, Lysara's fingers paused mid-adjustment. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. Something was not adding up. The texture, or the timing, the way Vedran was sitting like a man awaiting emotional sentencing. Her internal suspicion meter flickered to life. Oh, interesting. There might be more stupidity here than she originally budgeted for. Outwardly, calm king. Inwardly, this is fine, this is not fine, everything is on fire. Lysera leaned closer again, voice low enough that only he heard. Your Majesty. Danger. So much danger. Yes, her eyes held his, sharp, curious, almost knowing. You are going to explain something to me soon. Vaedren's heartbeat attempted escape. Across the room, Velmora was still watching, still calculating, still terrifying. And somewhere behind them, Mavren quietly began preparing emergency escape routes. Because the lie? Oh, the lie was cracking, and everyone in the room could feel it. The consultation chamber was quiet, or too quiet. The kind of quiet where dignity goes to lie down and think about its life choices. Lysera stood across from Vaedren, arms folded, expression calm in the way that suggested someone was about to pay emotionally. The scar had been stabilized. The illusion, however. Oh, that thing was on life support. Her eyes flicked to his face again, then back to his eyes. Slow. Measuring. Your Majesty, she said evenly, would you like to explain why your injury behaves like decorative theater? Vaedren's spine locked. Mavren, from the corner, slowly opened a fresh bag of roasted nuts. Velmora leaned forward slightly in her chair. Oh yes. The royal audience was seated. He inhaled. Exhaled. Attempted dignity. I may have, he began carefully, made a strategic miscalculation. Lysera did not blink. That is one way to describe whatever this is. Mavren whispered through a mouthful of nuts. Technically accurate. Vaedren did not look at him, because violence was still illegal indoors. I was being rejected repeatedly, Vaedren admitted. Lysera's brow lifted slightly. He continued, voice tight with the memory of 12 consecutive emotional assassinations. For being excessively symmetrical. There was a pause. A very long pause. Lysera stared at him. Then, very slowly, she pressed her fingers to the bridge of her nose. You disfigured yourself, she said carefully, because women thought you were too handsome. Mavren, traitor that he was, added helpfully. 12 times. Vaedren closed his eyes. Mavren. Yes? Please experience silence. She began pacing. Once. Twice. Or the controlled movement of a woman actively deciding whether to be impressed, furious, or professionally concerned. You let the entire court believe you survived a violent incident, she said slowly. Yes. To avoid romantic rejection. Yes. And you involved me in maintaining the lie. Vaedren swallowed. Technically. Mavren whispered, Oh, he's cooked. Vaedren stepped forward. Careful, earnest, dangerously genuine. That was not my intention, he said quietly. I did not mean to deceive you specifically. Lysera stopped pacing. Her eyes met his. Sharp, still guarded. You still did. Direct hit. Vaedren nodded once, because he had at least one functional brain cell left. Yes. Silence stretched. Then he added, and this was where things went emotionally sideways. But I never lied about respecting your work. Pause. Another pause. A very complicated pause. Lysera's expression flickered. Just briefly. Mavren leaned forward like a man watching premium slow-burn drama. Velmora's eyes gleamed. Oh, she was fully invested now. Well, the Queen Mother said smoothly from her chair, this is the most entertaining court development in years. Vaedren did not even look surprised. Mother. Yes, darling. Please stop enjoying this. Velmora smiled with all the warmth of a woman planning grandchildren 6 moves ahead. No. She turned back to Vaedren, professional mask back in place, but not as cold as before. Progress. Microscopic. You want to fix this? She asked. Vaedren straightened immediately. Yes. Then you work for it. Sir, that was not a suggestion. What Mavrin whispered reverently, character development arc unlocked. You will stop hiding behind theatrics, Lysara continued. Vedran nodded. You will stop agreeing too fast. He nodded again. You will, she added calmly, prove you are not, in fact, an emotionally dramatic peacock with impulse control issues. Mavrin choked on a nut. Vedran took that hit directly to the soul. Understood. But his eyes were very focused now. Because this was a challenge. And Vedran, unfortunately for everyone's peace, loved a challenge. Later that night, Vedran stood at the balcony, staring into the distance like a man planning something deeply unnecessary. Mavrin appeared beside him carrying roasted nuts, honey cakes, and what looked suspiciously like betting slips. You're planning something, Mavrin said calmly. Vedran's jaw set. I am. Mavrin nodded approvingly and opened the snacks. Excellent. I will require front row seating. Vedran exhaled slowly, because for the first time since this entire disaster began, he wasn't panicking, he was preparing. And somewhere across the palace, Lysara Ven had absolutely no idea that the kingdom's most persistent bad decision was about to try very, very hard to impress her. God help everyone involved. If you have ever publicly committed to a decision that could either fix your life or end it socially, congratulations, you are emotionally prepared for what Vedran was about to do. The kingdom, however, was not. The grand hall was packed, again. Nobles in polished rows, ladies in careful formation, 3 different betting pools running quietly in the back. Or because history had taught this kingdom one reliable truth. If Vedran is involved, something embarrassing will occur. Mavrin sat comfortably in the second row, with snacks already deployed, like a man who believed in preparation. Velmora sat beside him, regal and alert. Too alert. Dangerously alert. Oh, she murmured, watching her son take his place at the front. This feels promising. Mavrin slowly pushed the honey cakes closer to himself. He did not trust her tone. Vedran stood tall at the center of the hall. No theatrical lighting, no dramatic scar touch-ups, just him. Very composed, very intentional, and sweating internally like a man walking barefoot across emotional lava. Because across the room, Lysara Ven stood exactly where she had during the first disaster. Calm, unbothered, professionally unimpressed. Sir, the symmetry of this moment was aggressive. Whispers spread, soft, anticipatory. Is this another one? Do we need to prepare the fainting couches? Someone secure the chandelier cat. Mavrin leaned back and whispered happily. Place your bets, Your Majesty's mother. Velmora did not blink. My son is about to do something deeply inconvenient for my peace. She sounded thrilled. He stepped forward. The hall quieted. Even the suspicious Baron stopped breathing dramatically. Vedran's voice carried clean and steady. For 12 years, he began, this ceremony has ended in educational disappointment. A few nobles coughed. One lady visibly pretended not to remember fainting. Vedran continued, eyes already locked on one very specific woman. But today, he said calmly, I will be making a clear selection. Across the hall, Mavrin sat up straighter. Velmora's pupils dilated like a woman seeing grandchildren in high definition. Lysara, however, only tilted her head slightly, suspicious. Vedran stepped toward her, measured, steady, brave in the way of a man who had already embarrassed himself publicly multiple times and therefore had nothing left to lose. He stopped in front of her. Close, but respectful. Good instincts. Lysara's eyes flicked over him, assessing, always assessing. You look very confident today, Your Majesty, she said mildly. Vedran held steady. I am attempting growth. Mavrin whispered, Oh, that was smooth. Velmora nodded approvingly. Yes, Continue the growth. Lysara did not make this easy. Of course she didn't. She stepped slowly around him once, that same calm circle, and the one that had originally ended his peace. Vaedren held still, barely. His pulse, however, was doing aggressive cardio. She stopped in front of him again, eyes sharp, voice quiet. "And you are certain," she asked, "that you are no longer making emotionally questionable decisions?" "Sir." The pressure in that question could crack stone. Vaedren exhaled once. "Steady." "For the first time in 12 years, he said honestly, "I am very certain." Pause. Long pause. The entire court leaned forward like synchronized chaos enthusiasts. Vaedren turned slightly, addressing the room without looking away from Lysara. "My selection," he said clearly, "is Lysara Ven." Silence detonated. Somewhere in the back, a noble dropped a goblet. Mavrin slapped the arm of his chair and whispered, "Oh, he really did it." Velmora. Velmora did not move. But her soul had already begun knitting baby blankets. Because peace is illegal. Lysara did not immediately react. She studied him. Long. Careful. Looking for weakness, for panic, for theatrical nonsense. What she found instead was a man standing very still, very sincere, and only mildly terrified. Progress. Dangerous progress. Her opinion meter ticked upward again. She stepped closer. Just enough to be heard. "You realize," she said quietly, "this means I will be watching your decisions very closely." Vaedren, brave fool that he was, said, "I would expect nothing less." "Sir." That was the correct answer. Behind them, the Queen Mother pressed a hand dramatically to her chest. "Oh, I am already naming children." Mavrin passed her a honey cake. "For strength." 6 a.m. Peace lasted exactly 9 hours. Bang! Or the bedchamber doors flew open with maternal violence. Velmora stood framed in the doorway like a beautifully dressed alarm clock. "Excellent progress," she announced briskly. "Now let us discuss grandchildren scheduling." Vaedren sat bolt upright, immediate regret flooding his entire bloodstream. "Mother." Too late. Beside him. Very calm, very awake, very dangerous. Lysara Ven slowly turned her head and smiled. Not sweet, not soft, but deeply, deeply interested. Vaedren felt the exact moment his peaceful life officially ended. The kingdom of Arketh was, predictably, not calm. Minor chaos lingered, a knocked-over vase here, Mavrin taking notes there, but the royal menagerie had mostly been contained. Vaedren stood in Lysara's workshop, staring at her like a man who had survived years of rejection, humiliation, arson, and public scar disasters. Mavrin hovered nearby, mostly for moral support and snacks, and Vaedren was finally ready to speak. He cleared his throat. Lysara looked up from her work, arching an eyebrow. "Yes?" she asked, calm, mildly amused, professionally unimpressed. Vaedren took a deep breath. I need to say something." Her eyes narrowed, curiosity piqued. "I love you," he said firmly, his voice steady. Lysara blinked. He repeated it, louder, stronger, because this time he wasn't hiding behind theatrics, scars, or social faux pas. "And I'm not telling you this." He gestured vaguely at the workshop, at Mavrin snacking in the corner. "Because I am losing to a goat." Lysara's mouth twitched into the faintest smile, a warning, a tease, and a little softening all at once. "The court, the ceremonies, the chaos, none of it matters," he said, stepping closer. "I just want you. I just want this." Her eyes softened, but her usual razor-sharp wit remained. "And you're sure," she asked, voice teasing, "that this is about me, and not just avoiding future disasters?" Vaedren's expression never wavered. "I'm sure," he said. "You are the only chaos I want to deal with." For a moment, the workshop was quiet. Then she stepped closer. Very close. She examined his scar one last time, professionally, and his eyes, personally. And then she smiled. Slow, dangerous, and completely disarming. Vedran's chest puffed slightly. He felt historically brave. And when she took his hand, gently, deliberately, it was clear. The scars, the chaos, the ridiculousness of his life, it all finally led to the right disaster. What Mavrin whispered from the corner, "This is officially the best disaster yet." Vedran didn't care. For the first time, he felt like a king who had truly chosen correctly.